All right, we are in recording as part of the singularity. Jordan's, why are you laughing at me?
No, he's
I'm
laughing because
sorry. It's
I
Josh's
just
fault.
messaged Jordan. I'm like, you joined, and he's like, I'm on the call, and I'm looking. I'm like, what is he talking about? And there his face is. It's a Tuesday, man.
May I suggest gallery view?
No, I'm in gallery view. It's just a Tuesday.
It's just a Tuesday. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to a contributor meeting. We're all family and friends here. If anyone would like to start with yelling at somebody, that would be a great way. That's how my family starts a meeting. So maybe not yours. Okay, not yours. I think it would. The purpose of this meeting and the agenda was around Cassandra 4.0, getting that out the door, but specifically it was Cassandra. There's an epic out there, 15536, and there's my impression was that a lot of activity, but there's some stuff that needs to get cleaned up or discussed, specifically things that are unassigned right now. So I will pause there, and would anybody like to take that initial stab at where we're going here?
Talk a lot, but I can talk. I was the one that created that epic, so I'm guilty. We got two things. Number one is assignees, and number two is shepherds, and whether or not the shepherds that are on there have the bandwidth to engage or not. I talked to Jordan and John last week about this because we were going to get the project management emails back up and going because we kind of dropped those after the beta hit. So what we were like as a shared point of view going to propose is just let's figure out if the shepherds that are on there have the bandwidth to help mentor and guide those tickets. And if not, we'll pull them off. And that way we have a view of which of these tickets need shepherds, which ones need assignees. Then we know where the gaps are in terms of resourcing and go from there. Does that seem sane?
Yeah. My what I was hearing is that that the energy of getting those moving is important. I mean, having it sit there unassigned seems like it'll never get done.
Yeah, and that's going to require just constant attention. Essentially, somebody's just going to have a checkbox where every day or every other day they go through and make sure that things are still moving along. And to Paolo's point from the dev list, there's an opportunity to use the status in Jira to surface this stuff. So blocked or waiting feedback, we can just create quick filters and see when things are stalling and just poke and keep them going.
Yeah, I saw that Paolo went through several of the tickets and asked folks for a quick update. So it's nice to see that there's some progress on those.
Yeah, I think the thing that we talked about too, which is important, is right now there's no progress on them. We don't have to make progress on all of them. Just like progress on some is progress. So I think it's also Paolo's picture is nice to see because we see that also three of them have had some work done. And I think those can be a model for how the others get done.
Actually, yeah, to that point, Ifan added an update on the upgrade and diff test ticket a little bit ago today, which has some good information on it.
So one of the things I noticed is like inside like 15538, I'm sharing my screen if you didn't see that. There's really nothing going on inside of here that I could see. It looks like, there was some activity, but there's nothing attached to it. And is that the updates that we were talking about, Josh?
If you had told on activity, oh, sorry.
Oh, I think Scott was referring to there was a slightly different ticket. The upgrade and diff tests instead of other areas. But actually what I was going to add is just some background that may be helpful is a lot of these, like it says reference from doc from NGCC, which may be helpful in figuring out like where we broke all these out. But we were talking about a lot of things. And I think like a lot of them were like, we knew an area we needed to focus, but part of the work really was to drill down and figure out what we needed to focus on specifically. Which is, I guess, kind of what I saw as step one is the shepherd and the people who are going to work with it, sit down and figure out what the reasonable testing in that component is.
Yeah, and I see Paulo was on here as advertised. Here he is. Hey, what's going on? Is it a matter of just making sure that we start pinging people and reminding at this point?
That'd go a really long way, yeah. And in cases where folks are assigned to something but are currently working on something else, if they can offer an estimate of when they expect to be able to pick it up, I think that'll help us all plan as contributors to a project or figure out if it might be good for somebody else to pick it up if that's too far out.
And Patrick, can you pull up the metrics one?
Which one's the metrics one?
If you go back, there's a few down.
Over here?
Back, yeah, there was that list of subtasks you had. I don't know if that's all the way down.
Yes, right here.
Yes.
This one.
Yeah, 8.2. I think the metrics one has been a good example of I think, like, ideally what would happen where a few people got together. I don't know if David and Dinesh and others want to speak to this that were involved, but they got together and sort of figured out, you know, here's a proposal for some testing. Here's how we can take that and make it a little bit better. You know, here's the ideal world. And this is one that's had good progress. I think can be a model for a future tickets. That
well, we still have the unassigned on here though, Jordan, and maybe that's where I get hung up. Is like, well, when I see unassigned, I'm like, oh, no one's responsible for it, or there's no shepherd.
Yeah, I don't think we've had I think an area we could improve is probably like project management hygiene, both in this case and another one that Josh, John, and I talk a lot about is fixed version 4.0 beta just tends to be the default for everybody. So I think there's a few areas where we could be, like as a group, a little bit more on top of that.
Yeah, okay. And I mean, as much as, no, I'm not going to do that.
No, but so I would go down and look. I mean, there are people who have, if you go through these comments, who would be the logical assignee. And also assignee isn't singular. There can be multiple, I believe, in Jira.
Yeah, Shepherd is kind of a new concept, but I think a very fitting one for what we're facing here, which is due to the fact that we don't have empirical data to really help point our attention toward defects or surfacing. We don't RCA things. We don't tie them to subsystems. What we're leaning on is the qualitative assessment and synthesis of practitioners, of operators, of people that know the code base, but also run it. But that means we've got to figure out a way to articulate and then kind of codify what that is. Where is the uncertainty? Where is the fear? Where are the defects seen? And I think that's the big gap that we've got to bridge on these tickets, right? Where the statement is, we don't trust subsystem X. There's a massive amount of value and signal there. But the question is, what aspects of it? How do we test it? How do we get to a point of confidence? How do we bridge it to be quantitative and empirical, knowing we're never going to reach perfection in a time frame that's sustainable, but knowing we've got to do better? And
agreed. And I think, again, for some background on the Shepherd, to point that out, like that was a proposal Joey made to address, I think, kind of exactly what you're talking about, which is we may not need subsystem experts to be working on the tests all the time, but there does need to be a subsystem expert, the Shepherd, who has an idea of sort of where is valuable test, et cetera, because of that knowledge, because we don't have that data to drive those decisions out in the public.
Well, I'm also looking at like the issues that are dependencies on here. And I mean, as I look, if you go into the ticket, it looks like, wow, this is pretty much almost done. You know, that's
what I'm saying. This is one that is actually, I believe, very close to that. David, I don't know if you're on here and want to comment. I believe you've been pretty heavily involved.
Yep. I can comment. The original Shepherd for this even commented at the very bottom, the reviews were taking too long and no one is ending up reviewing things. So he kind of just stopped contributing.
Are you talking about Steven?
Yeah. So he was
actually
owning this
left
for a
the
while.
project, so he's left for no other reason than he's gone to work on something else. So.
Okay. Yeah,
but
what I saw is like
it was almost done, but not quite.
yeah, I think, and we talked about this a little bit last week, the definition of done is pretty crucial. And I'm sure
exactly what I was going to say is that what is the acceptance criteria, right? Like if it's clear what the goal is, then
no.
From a
Rahul cuts off just at the important moment.
Yeah, I think that right there is the bridge. For each of these, if we can figure out what the acceptance criteria is, it's going to require some exploration. That's going to require a Shepherd input. That's going to require that dialogue. But then once we have that, anybody should be off to the races. that can work.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, besides Stephen leaving, I think metrics was a good example of that, in that David had some good knowledge of sort of where we've been bit before as, you know, an operator, and Dinesh as well. And Stephen went in and did a bunch of work and that back and forth. It was a while ago now, and that tapered off. But I think prior to that, it was a good example of forward progress and finding that point.
Yeah, it worked out. I will say Steven struggled with that in the beginning, and I think it was crucial for someone with like some pre-existing expertise
Yes.
in a given domain to sort of like define the outline of this thing. Otherwise,
yeah, and I felt that too. So when I first joined, when I'm back to working on Cassandra, because I had taken a break in between, I started with testing, and I kind of said, like, I need a domain expert to tell me what's valuable to test because I've been out of it so long. So I definitely think that's important.
I think that's still true. Yeah.
What's a way to make that easier? It's hard because we're all, not only are we distributed, we all work in different places. So, I mean, I'm just trying to think of more meta here, because I think this is what I see as happens. We get a good set of energy. There's a lot of excitement, a lot of things happen, and then just because we're disconnected, it tapers off. And the Shepherd seemed like that's a good move to, you know, someone who's like feeling like they can keep it moving. But like to your point, Jordan, it's like, hey, I want to dig in here. Where do I even start?
Well, people come and go, right, on open source projects. And like Stephen being a great example of that, essentially somebody has to take on the mantle of applying energy into the system, and of continuing to check to make sure that shepherds are engaging, of seeing if things are blocked for a long time, of seeing that people aren't responding and things are stuck awaiting feedback, and of helping kind of navigate transitioning to different shepherds if somebody doesn't have the time to take on that role. And I think that's really all this subset of work actually needs is just that energy put into making sure the shepherds are available and engaged for the time frame being worked on, expectations are clear of availability, and that we get acceptance criteria for everything that's on here. And then the role of the shepherd becomes significantly less necessary because we've codified the value of what we want to explore in the domain, and then the work can be done. And it's a utopian ideal, right? It's a lot more complex than that. And then you get into it and you're like, here's all the reasons why none of this works. And like, we've all been through it before with this code base, but I don't think there's anything like too terribly existentially threatening about this. I just think it's going to require someone doing it, which is easier said than done with an open source project and volunteers.
Well, it's going to require some experts making time up front to define these things, to unlock the energy of the other people who are willing to contribute, but maybe not able to at that level yet.
Well, we can use this.
Agreed. Although I would add that I don't think it's solely up to those people. Like, I think having a shepherd who has like a few volunteers that know they're going to work on the project and having that dialogue, is helpful.
And none of these subsystems are bus factor one, right? Like, we can start taking a bat to the weeds and in the bushes and rally up some people that know these areas and see if we can get some time out of them.
Also, another question I had was, you know, I looked at the Epic and I saw all of these unassigned tickets. Like, at the very least, what I would want to know is which one do we want to hack away at first, right? What is more critical? Like, I don't believe in everything is important. That's total bullshit. Like, there's always going to be something that's slightly more important than something else, right? So I look at these tickets and I'm like, I want to help, but which one should I help with? You know? And it could even be like, oh, some of them are easy. They're not as important, but I'd be like, okay, sure, I'm lazy. I'll work on the easy one, you know? At least knowing the priority gives me a signal, and I'm being selfish when I say that, but I think it actually gives other people a signal too. It's like, hey, these are the things that I think can be done in order. Here's an easy one, here's a hard one. So that's hard to understand too. Like, somebody who's an expert can say, this is probably gonna be difficult because you gotta go through the code and look at which metrics are in each of the versions, make an X file, compare. There's real work involved just to come up with acceptance criteria here, right? But looking at it with a one sentence description, I'm just like, God, I don't know. I don't know if I can do this.
Sure. Yep. Getting to clarity there sounds super important. We can use the priority field to indicate what we assess as the relative priority for the project. I know that I have a couple personal biases in terms of like correctness of the read-write path, repair, compaction, and that type of thing, and a little less concern about like first party and bundled tooling. But yeah, absolutely. Is
there a way to use this epic to communicate that? Because this,
it's kind of opening Pandora's box, but I got Gavin to fix our project to where we can actually rank things on backlogs on Kanban boards, for instance. But here be dragons, right? Because the relative priority of different tickets to each other on a granular basis to queue work is something that we probably have a lot of different opinions on. And so I think Scott's kind of more broad brush of let's just set the priority field for how important it is to like the fundamentals of what the database offers is probably the right way to approach it without starting a holy war of dragging things in backlogs. So
just real quick, I also encouraging anyone that wants to comment in the chat that is available. So if you want to +1 or tell Josh he's stupid or whatever you're going to do, that's a great place to do it. So
my words are stupid, not me, Patrick.
I'm kidding.
Important.
But I mean, I want to make sure that everyone knows that there's a chat. You don't have to join by voice if you don't want to. I do save the chats after and post those. So,
so one other thing I'd throw
thanks,
out
Chris.
Jordan alluded to this. Thank you, Chris. Jordan alluded to this where like the fixed version, we kind of have this default bucket that we're dumping everything into. And we don't really have a muscle as a project for going through and grooming that backlog and saying, this is okay to go in 4.0.1, for instance. So from an optics perspective, the backlog of work for 4.0 is growing at a pretty intimidating rate. But from a reality perspective, we could probably serve to groom that stuff out. I'm not sure how we would want to approach that.
The most effective way I've seen to approach that is to ping each ticket, to be honest.
It's a lot of pinging.
Still better than before. There were tickets that we were pinging since 3 years on the alpha, so now it's way better.
It is a lot less. It is.
Yes.
I mean, I'm just kind of like brainstorming here. So probably stupid ideas forthcoming, but dropping everything into some kind of like 4.0 triage fixed version or giving them a label and then having people actually go through and select from that bucket and opt in for them into something where we say, okay, a human being that is on the project right now cares about this being done. That might be a way to approach it instead of like having a single person go through and do the contra of that and negatively exclude things.
Yeah, it might cause some waves along the way, but I do think it will be more effective. We've tried the other way of asking people to opt things out. That's what we did with the spreadsheet a while back, and we ended up pinging all of the tickets. So
we can make a really simple query where it's like if label is in blah, and then just label all these things and have a board of that and ask everybody to go through it in a week's time frame, for instance. And then anything that didn't get flipped, we just remove. I mean, within reason, right? If it's like massive data loss in storage engine and nobody opts for it, we should probably be like, oh, maybe we'll do this anyway. But
maybe the middle road there would be to use the multi-fix version and leave the current one and set the triage, which would allow us to find them, but also not unilaterally change people's choices.
Oh yeah, I was thinking label, not fix ver.
Oh, okay. Yeah, either way.
Yeah. But not losing the metadata of where they're flagged right now would be key with whatever we do, I think.
One of the things that I think we see a lot pattern-wise when looking at the burn-up charts that Josh has shared is that we're making rapid progress on new issues that are identified and fixed quickly as part of different contributors for upgrade programs and their quality and testing work. But we probably have a pretty substantial backlog that isn't moving much, hasn't moved much in a long time, and isn't really being actively worked on. That would probably be good for a reality check of saying, is this in, or do we really think it's acceptable to punt?
I'm gluing what you're saying, Scott, with what Rahul is saying. And it's like, I think that's really important. It's like, there's an overwhelm factor when you show up and you look at a Kanban or something like that. Like, I have the ability. I'm a little nervous about where to start, or I'm not sure where to start. And it's, yes, you can go into the dev list or you can go somewhere and ask, but it's not, I'm trying to, how do you lower the barrier? We've had low-hanging fruit for a long time, and I know that was just a discussion in Slack, But LHF was great because as someone like me in community, when someone says, how can I start contributing? Go look at LHF. Is there a tag that we could add or something in that realm where and this is something I could use. Like whenever I'm talking to folks and Rahul, you're going to be doing a workshop soon. Like, hey, you want to contribute? Go look at this tag. You know, we can start rallying community around like a few things that are like you said, that backlog.
Yeah, LHF
do you mean
sounds
a
fine.
tag? Oh, sorry.
Sorry,
Let's go.
that's all.
I was just going to ask, are you talking about a tag in parallel or the LHF tag for 4.0 and specifically?
Well, if the LHF tag is appropriate in this case, I don't know if there's any LHF, because I mean, I know there's some definition of what exactly is low hanging.
Yeah, well, so we could infer LHF from some of the metadata on these issues, right? We could say priority low and normal, complexity low equals LHF, and then just create a query for new contributors to come in and they can go to a board where it's defined. It's like, look.
The Kanban has one already. I think it's not exactly well exposed. And I mentioned it buried in a thread. But if you pull up the Kanban.
Black thread's the devil, unless it's a mailing thread, which is not much better. But.
Yeah, actually, I'll drop it in the chat, I think.
This is something I'm thinking in terms of, I think everyone here is probably much more in the know about a lot of things in the project. But I'm thinking of like, Melissa, you and I coming together on like a blog post that talks about like, hey, you want to help get 4.0 across the board? Here's some stuff that would be really helpful right now. And it's these, like this backlog that we could clear out, but be more forthcoming about it. Like here's, you know, shepherd that effort, for lack of a better word.
I think the prerequisite for that is having the shepherds sort of filling those out a little bit more and having specificity that Scott talked about. Otherwise, you end up just saying, there's low-hanging fruit, come and work on it. We'll let you know what it is when we're ready.
I'm also not sure any of those wiki tickets are marked low-hanging fruit. I'm trying to see what is, but Jira's being very slow for me right now. But the link's in the chat if folks want to pull it up. It's LHF with the no assignee open only, but you can pull the no assignee off if you want to see what other tickets are in there as an example. I don't know what's in there. It may be completely not valuable to new contributors or people that can help.
As we come closer to the 4.0 release, though, I think LHF is going to be decreasingly valuable in terms of just how a new contributor can jump in and contribute to something that's critical to the release also. And so I think if we can finish off the 4.0 critical stuff, because it's either, as we come down to the wire, it's either controversial and needs some conversations around it, or it's not really trivial. Does that make sense?
The things I would think of in that bucket are possibly the non-deeply coding tasks. So perhaps things like reviewing release notes, reviewing documentation and checking that you can actually do the things that it says that you can in the docs, looking for holes where, you know, when you try to do something and raise it as a flag saying, hey, you know, I tried to install Cassandra 4.0 and I'm in this terrible mess. You know, those sorts of things that could smooth the path for other upgrades later.
John's last point.
Also, oh, sorry, Scott, go ahead.
No, you're good.
It's also actually a wonderful opportunity, I think, to bring people in if you have an active shepherd, because I've always found, at least, that pairing someone with a fresh set of eyes with an experienced person leads to some really like effective testing. And it gives the person who's new a chance to learn a subsystem that they're probably going to need to learn deeply to work on it anyways. So I think it depends in part how it's framed, although yes, over time, like, that will diminish, but I think the shepherds can, like with what John and Scott mentioned, with better definition, improve that.
Yeah, what I was going to add as well was that I think one of the best opportunities for new contributors to contribute to the project would be to help prepare for their own upgrade via things like executing diff tests or any performance tests that they'd like to run on their side. That will both help them gain confidence in the quality of the build and their ability to upgrade to it. But also help us identify performance issues or potential correctness issues before we cut the release too. So that's also a hugely valuable area of contribution that doesn't require deep knowledge of the Cassandra code base or contribution process.
Yeah, I just think there's a world of amazing distributed developers out there. Not that they are distributed, that they work with distributed systems that, and you know, to the point, some of the discussion we were having last week, and this is some of the more touchy part of it, was like, we're not doing a really good job of encouraging new people to join the project. And that's one of the things I want to try to help stimulate a bit. And the ways we do that are create these nice on-ramps and open the door. And I think this is a good way. If we can have shepherds that can create some LHF and we can go out and promote that better to get more contributors. We have a lot of people around the world that are, let's face it, no one's going anywhere. That's how we get 12,000 people to show up for a workshop, because they are stuck at home. So let's put them to work. I think this is an idea that could have some legs.
Curating a good set of LHF tickets and publicizing it sounds like a really good first step. Yep.
So one of the other ways that we could perhaps push those is through the status updates that the three of us Jays were sending out. And we can include things that aren't being worked on right now and would be good to being picked up, which is an interesting segue into asking the community more broadly how useful they found them, and if we would be able to pick up the pace by producing them slightly more frequently, like 2 or 3 times a week, and listing what we think people are blocked on, just to remind people that they're not working in a vacuum and that other tickets are blocked on their responses and those sorts of things.
And we'd love to get some ideas to like what content format, because we played with many, would benefit people.
Was it useful at all for anyone? I guess that's the step one that we're coming from. Did anyone read it, or were they motivated by it to do things they wouldn't have otherwise?
It's also a good signal for the community to say that, hey, we're accepting, you know, new contributors, and that things haven't come to a standstill.
Yeah, I did partially see it that way from the beginning of trying to communicate that we were making progress and have measurable progress for us to look at recorded somewhere.
Yeah, and you could achieve that in other ways as well by, you know, posting a monthly state of the community where you talk about all the new things that have happened. I guess the reason we're doing it specifically now is to try and accelerate the completion of the 4.0 project as much as general community health, which I do think is important. But everyone seems very hung up on completing 4.0 and being able to move on past it. So that to me feels like it's most important to achieve some success there, and then if we're smart, we'll build on that momentum and continue to keep the community strong by pushing on past that.
This is a good line. So, okay, well, I think we'll pick this up. I mean, this is really good. I think this is a nice direction that we're getting out of this. This is a good discussion. But I know Melissa and I will talk about how we can do like a blog post, and I'm going to go tap on people, and if I'm going to be the person who's going to rattle the cage on, hey, who's got some LHF for me? I need to make sure that I'm not just bugging, you know, Jordan or Josh or John all the time. Or is that who I'm bothering all the time for now?
There's a lot of people in the Cassandra Dev Slack room. You raise the bat signal there. Community can rally, right?
Yeah. All right. I will throw the signal.
And again, the more we can engage those shepherds, the more we're likely to have things written up that we can mine and share around. So that seems like priority number 1 for me.
And Patrick, I know how to commit to the blog post.
You know,
happy to commit to the blog
you're
post.
on the team, man. You're on the team, Rahul. Right on. Yeah, that's a rare skill.
No joke.
I can second that, Rahul. It's crazy.
Right? It is like, really? This is what we have to do to put one page up on the interwebs? Like, come on. But no, I'm serious, Patrick. Like that kind of stuff, you can just just put it over the wall. Now that I've got my set up and I can really crank it out. And it doesn't, now that I know exactly what to do, it's not that hard.
He's a blog machine. Right on. Cool.
That's awesome. Thank you. I think the blog posts are roughly my extent of contribution, at least in terms of patches to the project as well.
Hey, a contribution's a contribution. Let's do this. All right. Different topics, more topics. Nobody has any more. That's fine. I don't have to use the whole hour. Okay. Well, yeah, go ahead, Scott.
Sure,
One
yeah,
more thing.
I was going to highlight the update that Ifan added on 15537 because it is something that I'm glad that we're able to get up on the ticket. Ifan's update on the status of upgrade and diff test was that dozens of clusters so far that he's been working with have passed the diff test, which compare a 3.0 build with the latest 4.0, with the number of clusters increasing each week and tested clusters with data sizes ranging from gigabytes to tens of terabytes. The diff test does a comparison on the value of every row and every column with randomized forward and reverse scans to assert complete identity between the data. So to be able to have a linearly increasing amount of clusters diffed and increasingly larger volume of data too has helped us gain a lot of confidence in the build.
I mentioned this to random people in random contexts, but a couple of contributors are looking at open sourcing something that does similar things, that uses Cassandra Diff, that uses workload generation tools to compare different clusters spanning different versions and things of that nature to make it available for the community. It's pretty nascent, but cleared through legal. Just have to find a name that is not terrible, and naming things is hard. So you can expect that to be around whenever we can think of a good name.
Awesome.
Naming things is hard. Logos are even harder, by the way. I'm just going to tell you that right now. Because once you come up with a project, you got to have a logo, and then you get the t-shirts. That's the way it works.
Well, with a name, it's a lot easier. You don't have to be an artist. You just have to like think. When you get into design the committee for a logo, man, that's hard.
But for the name, you got to pass the Urban Dictionary test, which is becoming more and more difficult. So that's the unfortunate. I discovered that earlier today. So it's a real thing. Anyway.
I just threw shade at Kaz Operator because first of all, it's the most unoriginal name and it doesn't have a logo. That was in my talk for Apache Commons. Come on, we're not even trying anymore. We'll just use a fixed font and move on with life. So yeah, I mean, I just general feel. I mean, the thing that I felt after many conversations last week is we're a lot closer to shipping 4.0 than we thought. Is that fair?
I feel that, yes.
Anyone dissent on that? Like, oh my God, you're delusional. Because I hear it a lot, so I'm okay with that.
I would certainly say that we're not finding things faster than we're fixing things, which means we're going in the right direction.
Because I was serious in that mail. I would really love to stick it to 2020 and ship this year. Just because I need something good this year. I don't know about you all, but this hasn't been a fun year. I feel like I need to end on a good note. And right now, this is pretty much all I'm hinging all my hopes on right now.
You are tying this project to 2020 in any way. You are jinxing everything we care about on this call. So
I know that could be bad.
There, man.
Yeah, it could be bad, but I'm just saying, all I want for Christmas, you know?
Yeah, I think in terms of next steps, I don't want to volunteer the other two J's for things they don't want to volunteer for. But we were putting energy into the project management side of things before, and I'd be happy to do that again. In terms of the whole add a new fix version, let's opt in for what we want to do. Let's get our status updates out, prune the shepherds, all that. I'm okay helping take on that mantle if other people are as well. So
yeah,
I see that smile, John. That's very convincing. Yeah.
Start sending daily emails to the dev list out of Jira. Here's your latest report.
That was actually John's first suggestion. I shit you not.
John, it's not a bad idea. And lately I've been getting into Zapier or Zaps. I can do some stupid stuff with that now. So just, let me know if you want me to turn that loose, because I could ping individuals. That'd be amazing. Hey, Shepard, how you doing today?
It needs that human touch on Slack where you're like, I'm so sorry I'm bothering you, and I know you're so busy, but for real, what's going on here? So
let me tell you about the Zapier Slack bot.
Oh yeah.
Does it come with a language model that delivers the poke in a nice way or something? Like,
call Watson NLU and it will do that actually from Zapier.
It'll take some personal information, twist it up. It's actually kind of like Siri. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but yeah, it's like, I'm sorry.
Well, if a very motivated new contributor shows up in Slack, volunteers to help with project management, and very aggressively begins reaching out to everyone at exactly the same second, I guess then we'll know.
And I have passed a Turing test. I will take my award.
We just need to take everything Scott's ever written and feed it to a GPT-3 model and just have that go and be the project management bot for the project. We'll be good.
Oh.
So can I just ask something really quick? We have Harry, we have NoSQL bench that can generate data based on data models. Would a broad ask of the community to say, as we lead up to the 4.0 release, if you want to find a way to contribute, one thing you can do is anonymize your data model and contribute that to a GitHub repo that's separate from the project to say, let's go through and I don't know if this is too broad, but maybe have some selective criteria from a shepherd, like what you guys have been talking about, to say, let me go and see these different data models and see what are representative of things that we may not have considered, and then do some NoSQL bench or Harry type of testing around those data models, and then have that be kind of and I'm kind of, I don't know what's been already done, but I thought maybe if we can get some more kind of exotic data model representation so that we can broaden the testing, because I just feel like previous releases, we get as far as we can with the testing, but we don't know. One of the things that is more exotic that comes in the 4 or like the .1, .2, .3 bugs is, oh wow, we didn't realize that this upgrade scenario with this data model would be problematic or something like that. Is that reaching at straws here, or is that something that would be helpful for this effort now that we have like data generative tools and testing tools that allow us to do some of this?
I think that's a ideal goal we want to get to. I would even add that on top of capturing data models, we'd want to capture the shape of people's rights and queries, because often where we find those edge cases are some like reverse iteration on some weird boundary mixed with exactly the things that you mentioned. So I think it would be great to get to a place where we have that. I think, like you mentioned, like we're just getting the primitives out to build that, like Harry and NoSQL bench and others.
So you're saying, okay, so if we could have like I'm just trying to think of like, to cast a wide net without making a shepherd's life living misery of trying to curate this, but just saying, okay, you have a data model, which is kind of just like even just at the table level, a query model based on a single table and a query pattern, read and write query pattern and percentages of query pattern, and some idea of the data that's being written into the table. So not just to say like field foo, which is text, but giving some idea of how that data distribution is.
Absolutely. And I think the idea there is right now, Harry just pulls from a uniform distribution. And I don't work on Harry day to day, so Alex and them may tell me I'm missing something horrible here. But in my mind and the parts that I have used, it should be possible to feed it a different class that pulls from a distribution that, exactly what you said, has been built from scanning a user's data.
Yeah, I would suspect the modification to FQL tool may give us the ability to do live profiling of like cardinality and iteration direction, things like that, without actually dumping the binary content itself. I haven't looked at it, so I am arguably probably very wrong on some points there as well. But profiling those aspects of a workload to feed into a generator shouldn't be rocket science. I'm just going to apply energy to it.
No, we needed the library first that lets you do it, right? So,
Yeah,
but
and-
I think those would be awesome places
yeah.
to get to.
The as yet named project includes a script that will dump out and anonymize people's schema. So it should be like a one-click, one-run. If you want to contribute your schema to a GitHub repo, this is how you can totally scrub the thing and not have to do any extra work.
Yeah, and I'm more familiar with NoSQL Bench, but that NoSQL Bench has some distribution types of stuff built in that maybe we could share across and kind of cross-pollinate there as well.
Yeah, I think we're probably going to need to, as a community, figure out what we want to do from that front, because my understanding is that Jean-Luc, he's the engineer that's working on this, took a look at NoSQL Bench, and at least the usability in its initial incarnation of trying to get generative workloads based on schemas was prohibitively complex. Assuming the functionality was actually there. I think Jonathan Shook is actually working on that right now. So, I mean, there's moving parts that we're going to need to get lined up and figure out what the right way to do it is, but we'll get there for sure.
Would somebody want to shepherd that, like this data model collection of type of thing? I think there's some management to that to make it useful, and then put that into the machinery of the Harry and other things. So like, I think there's the collection, and that's the easy part, I think, but important to make it simplistic enough for people to contribute on a wide basis. And then there's the curation, and then there's putting it in and adapting it to the machinery that is the testing.
I have a bunch of data models that I've been collecting because, you know, I mean, if you work in the practice, it's like, that's essentially the 80% of the bullshit in a failure is data model, right? So I can lend a hand with the shepherding. I don't have the bandwidth to do the whatever Harry or NoSQL kind of test cases around it. I'm not familiar. I've used Gatling, so I can make test cases that generate data. It really comes down to what the goal is. So like, we got to have some constraints. You know, are we talking like maybe use cases, right? So time series use case, customer record use case. And that's like, if you can come up with some use case constraints, that I can get that done in a week or so. And in terms of the data model, because I have a bunch of them that are fairly generic and not really customer specific. It's mine, right? Well, I can give that away.
And I'm not, the intent is not to add more kind of work creep into the finalization of but I was thinking of things that I've seen in the past that have been problematic on the initial release that we can mitigate, and also encourage contribution in a simplistic way as we get closer. So I'm not trying to add to the work that needs to be done for the release. That's absolutely not the goal there. I just was trying to think of ways that we could cast a wider net, since we're talking about new contributors, and then marshal that into something useful for the release.
Is this I think this might be a good opportunity to take this to a discuss thread on the dev list, just to broaden the net. And Jeremy, I think what you've outlined is great. It may be too much of an effort too soon, or I'm not sure. You're right, it could get in the way. But you know, there are very few people on this call, and to say that this is a deciding factor, no, let's open it up as a discuss.
Okay, I'll make a discuss thread and just see where that goes, and I'll explicitly say, you know, this is not trying to add more work, but in order to see what would be useful to mitigate certain things that we hadn't foreseen in the past.
I think the key what we would hope to find is maybe a potential sponsor of that, and you know, that, because you're right, it is an effort, but who would be willing to take that, and who knows who would be willing to do that?
Yeah, two things I'd add. I think this is a goal that we should get to. It may not be in the 4.0 cycle, but regardless, I think it will help, you know, towards this idea of us wanting to have a better definition of done, you know, saying that we run whatever changes through an arsenal of real user schemas and queries, et cetera, will really up the game in terms of like Cassandra quality and stability. And then the other thing, it definitely, I think there is a significant amount of work to get to that point from the sort of like primitives we have right now. It's non-trivial. But we may find if we do better define the work in the testing epics that a lot of what we want to test is covered by that. So, you know, we may find that we kind of knock out a whole bunch of testing by accomplishing it. So I think it kind of goes multiple ways.
I would also pile on Fallout into this same type of thing. Define something that would break Cassandra. It's not data model specifically, but Fallout, any kind of programmatic defined testing tool. There's some cool bug bounty kind of stuff that you could do there. Here, define it. Oh, you found something that really broke Cassandra. Congratulations. Here's some dough.
Yeah, and like I think it's a good point to say that this isn't on the critical path to the release, but this could be a broader effort to just say, you know, we could add to our library of things that could, like with Fallout and with this generation and things like that. This could help with, because I think anybody in the project, and I'm hoping this comes out on the discussion thread, is that anybody in the project, this isn't like a new feature. This isn't a CEP. This is more of a, let's broaden the scope of things that are known that can be tested so that we can broaden the library of what we're trying to do. So
it may actually be good as a CEP if we decide to not do it for 4.0. Or it may be a good example. Just, I guess, in the sense of saying, like, you know, I think there's something to be said for like putting in more effort into testing as we go forward, and not just saying like, okay, we've reached this like new, you know, status quo for 4.0 and it's what we need for the future. But either way, I think it would be a great addition over time. I don't know where it falls in terms of release cycle.
That was like fun too. I could see myself spending a Saturday morning breaking Cassandra. What? Oh, like no one else?
Databases.
Okay. Yeah.
It's kind of why I got into it, breaking databases.
Yeah, because I kept breaking them.
It's John's fault. He showed me quick theories, and then it was over from there.
All right, so Jeremy, looking forward to a discuss thread. You'll be starting.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
So right. Sort of the action items and takeaways are shepherds. Is that what I'm getting from? Yes. Besides, I mean, the other things we discussed, but.
So yeah, shepherds. Let's get on that. Like, who are they? Where are they? I think that's just the overall. Looking at also how can we find the low-hanging fruit towards 4.0? That's another big one. Melissa and I will be talking about that shortly today. We've already been pinging back and forth, like, let's get on this. And then the other one was Jeremy's discuss thread topic on, you know, the testing. How do we improve testing and user contributed tests?
Awesome.
Good call. All right. Thanks, everyone. I will have the transcripts. Well, my virtual assistant will have the transcripts done shortly, hopefully. And then I'll get those posted up into the CWiki, and I'll get this posted on the YouTube channel, Planet Cassandra. And so everyone can see what happened. But thanks again, everyone, for showing up. Good participation today. We'll do it when needed. We won't schedule it just yet, but as needed. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.